Alright, thank you for joining us. This is the correct way to set up a drum session in Cubase 5, a tutorial how to do that, and the fastest way and the cleanest and some tricks of the trade that kind of come in handy. So I've already got my Cubase session open. Let's go ahead and add some audio tracks by simply doing a control click and add audio track. We are going to add 8 unique tracks because we're going to have 8 unique microphones. They all need to be mono. Go ahead and open those up, and they populate as such with a nice color coordination going on, which makes it nice and easy to the eye and for editing. Let's go ahead and start labeling these. Let's do the kick on the top. Let's do a snare bottom, a snare top. Let's do a hi-hat, low tom, high tom, overhead snare, and overhead tom. Now the reason I put overhead snare and tom is because a lot of people use overhead left and right, but when they get down to actually miking and mixing it, they get confused of which one was left and right. So I like to put overhead snare and tom so I know exactly which mic is over what, and that way when it comes down to mixing, you know exactly where they're located, and you know what perspective, either drummer's perspective, where the drummer's sitting, or audience perspective from the audience as you look at the stage. So that being said, let's go ahead and open up our mixer window, which is function F3, and here are your tracks set here in front of you. And let's go ahead and start panning these. This is the kick drum. It's always going to be center no matter what. And I'm going to mix this as a audience perspective. So the snare would actually be a little bit to the right, say about 30. The snare bottom would be the same. The hi-hat would be a little bit farther just because it's that little bit farther over to the right. Low tom would actually be on the left. High tom would be on the right. And I'm actually not going to go too far with these, because if there's 2 toms, I just like to split the difference. If there's 3, I'll keep the mid tom in the middle and then pan 100% on the low and highs. Overhead snare will actually go to the right over the top of the snare. Overhead left tom will go to the left. And there's the panning for audience perspective. Okay? Now let's move on. Let's go ahead and I'm going to actually add a folder track, which is control click, and the folder track is right here. Click that, and actually if you see right here, it actually adds a folder just like you would on your desk, having a folder. And I'll label that drums. Go ahead and select all these by shift clicking all those. Drag them up, the little arrow shows that you're in the folder, and let go. That way you can close that folder and keep the whole session nice and clean, but your drum tracks are still there. And then if you need to edit them, you can open them back up. Alright, let's add one more folder called a group channel track. It needs to be in stereo, and it's located right here. Go ahead and label that drums as well. And then one last thing we need to add is called an effects channel track. Okay, it needs to be stereo because you're going to be sending all these channels out the effects. Let's go ahead and do just a simple reverb, which is right here. Let's do a simple Roomworks stereo. Hit OK, and there it is. Okay, go ahead and turn the how much you want the reverb into the mix. Turn that up all the way up to 100%, and I'll explain that in just a second. So good, there it is. Now we have to make sure that all these channels are actually patched to the correct mic that you have coming from your room. So to do that, you need to open up the VST connections, which shortcut is function F4, and it'll open up this window right here. Make sure that your input is actually selected, not the output, but the input. And if you notice, I only have 2 inputs, the stereo left and right. Now just know that right now currently my computer is not set up to an external interface for a DA conversion. So whatever your interface is on the outside that you're plugging into a computer, you're limited to the number of channels you have coming in on the interface that you have. So keep that in mind. If you have an interface that has 4 outs, then you're only going to have 4 channels. So make sure that if you're doing this tutorial that you have to have 8 actual channels that can come from your sound source or from your interface to the computer. Right now I'm not connected to any interface, so that's why everything looks like it's in the built-in audio of the computer. But we can still add the buses. So here we go. Right at the top, you can add a bus. They all need to be mono, and we're actually going to need 8 of them that correspond to the channels over here. Add 8, and if you notice, they're labeled mono, mono 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, all the way through. In this device port column, where they're highlighted in yellow, you will actually take this device and select which audio interface you have, which will show up in this window. So you'll select mono in to be channel 1, channel 2, channel 3, and so on. That would correspond with the mono names. Now you can rename these by just double clicking and putting a 1 or a 2 if you want to, and do it like that to make it easier. It's totally fine. So once you get all those assigned that correspond to your interface, then you are good to go. Close that down. Open up your mixer window, again function F3, and at the very top you'll see the left stereo in. It's assigned all the way to across. You'll need to select that top guy. So let's say the kick is in 1. So 1. The snare bottom is in 2, 3, and so on. Just keep going all the way down the line here. 5, 6, 7, and 8. Okay. Also, you notice it's going through the stereo out. We actually need that to go through the drum bus, which we created right over here. This group track, we need all these channels to come out the group track right here. Okay. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to skip the kick drum because I want to have more control over that than the overall kit. So I'm going to keep the kick drum out of that and keep it separate so I can have more control and it'll give me more punch and power as I need it. So here's the snare, stereo out. Let's go to the groups, and there it is, group drums. Just go all the way down the line and assign each one and out to that drum group. Alright, I believe that's all of them. Good. So as you see, 1 through 8 on the top, skipping the kick drum, then all these are now assigned to the group channel track. One handy thing about putting all these channels in a folder like this is that you can record and enable them all at the same time. Instead of going to each one and clicking each one, you can record one button and you're off and running, which is very, very nice to do. Also, if you select the solo button in the group channel track, you'll notice it'll highlight all the solos that you've grouped in that one group. Okay? Now, lastly, you'll notice that the effects channel track, a lot of people don't understand what this is for or how to use this, but this is your effects, your reverb. So what you're going to do is take in your group track, go to the option of sends over here in the left hand column, open that up, and go ahead and select this first column, and right there the RoomWorks is populated. Go ahead and select it and turn it on, and now with this fader left and right you can have full control of the one reverb for the entire kit, which is very nice. Instead of adding a reverb to the kick and then one to the snare track, another snare track, and one to the hi-hat, now you can do the entire kit under one reverb, and it's controlled right here, which is a very, very convenient thing to do. Now if you want to add more effects to individual pieces of the kit, that's totally fine. You can either make another group track and send it through there, or you can add it to the track itself and do it there. All EQs can be done independently up here, or you can do a final EQ on the entire kit and the actual group track. So, alright, that should be it, and you should be good to go. So if you record enable and turn your click on and hit record, there you have it. Nice and easy. Nice and easy. So one last thing before, make sure that if you're recording with the drums that if at all possible record to a click track. Now if you don't know the tempo of the song or the artist doesn't know, a really cool feature is in the project selection up here called a beat calculator. Select that and hit the tap tempo, And here you can actually use your space bar as a tap button to give you the tempo that you need. So if it's more of a ballad, it'll slow down. Once you get to a consistent number, let's say that my tempo is 110, because I'm right around that mark, 109.3. Just select OK, X out. Now down here on your transport, make sure you're in this mode and type in 110 and hit enter, and everything will now switch to 110 tempo. You can record accordingly. And you're off and running. That way when you go to editing your drum tracks, anything else like that, you can snap to the grid and everything snap to the tempo, and that would make it a lot easier. So, alright, if you have any questions or comments, please leave them, and we'll get to them as soon as possible. But I hope this is helpful, and we'll see you on the next tutorial.